think where we are at the moment, we're seeing a mass shift in IT. I think we've got a mass shift in the economy coming up. We've seen lots of change going on recently. And I think IT companies and IT providers inside businesses are at a stage where we are having to consider many different aspects. I think we've been lucky over the past 5 to 6 years where there's been a very clear message as to what we should be doing in IT. The virtualization message was very strong. It was very clear that the trend inside the industry was everyone was going from physical to virtual. And I think as that is now starting to plateau, we're now at this point where we've got a bit of cloud going on. There's a lot of people telling us that all workloads are going into the cloud. I don't know if we're seeing that. But we're also seeing increases from a number of other aspects. So I hope you find the content useful today. We've got some fantastic speakers from both Dell and VMware to back us up with that. So the agenda is as follows. We've got another break at 11:30 just to allow you to go and have a comfortable break and recharge your glasses. And we will be going then through to 1:15. I want to make this as interactive as possible. There's really not that many of us in the room. If you have questions, feel free to either interrupt the speaker, raise your hand, or at the end we do have a dedicated Q&A session where we will try and answer as many of those questions as possible. So please do ask the questions. So for me, we look back and I've been trying to find some meaningful statistics as to where the virtualization journey is going. And I think people have just got bored of hearing about it. Because you hear reports in 2011, 2012 as to what the adoption rate is for the amount of VM workloads going out there. And they seem to then give up around 2013, 2014 in terms of reporting it. But from what I can see for people like Spiceworks, it's approximately 75% of organizations are now virtualized, and approximately 85% of all workloads are now virtualized. We're seeing some strange things happen at the moment with the amount of physical adoption rising slightly, but it is micro. And we're not really sure why. It may be bigger workloads that people are deciding to put physical. Potentially things like containers might be being classed as a physical workload rather than a virtual workload. But we're not really seeing much change in that virtual infrastructure. Virtualization and abstraction is now changing and going to different layers. We've seen applications start to be abstracted with technologies like VMware App Vaults, allowing you to detach applications that are being installed on the desktop from the underlying operating system, but layering them on top. But where we're seeing software-defined networking and abstraction really starting to take off is now in software-defined networking and also software-defined storage. We're seeing people looking at hyperconverged platforms. What this is all about is simplification and allowing us to scale as we need it. The job from IT is fundamentally changing. Where we have been focused on looking at technology, we're really trying to go up the stack and really focusing on the business and focusing on the applications that matter to our users. Unfortunately, we can't really be buying technology for technology's sake anymore. We've got to be mapping it back to really what matters to the business. We're also seeing that businesses have virtualized, but we're now talking about phase 2 virtualization or phase 3 for some organizations. We're at that point where we're 3 to 5 years from companies virtualizing for the first time, and fundamentally what they have done over that time frame has changed. Where you may have needed 30 hosts inside your environment, with the improvements in CPU, we're seeing those consolidation ratios come down a lot less. Where it really mattered how many inputs, outputs per second our SAN had to make sure it could drive our workloads, it's no longer a consideration because things like flash-based storage or a hybrid storage is now becoming a commodity. It's becoming a lot more affordable. So we should be able to have bagloads of performance ready for our workloads. So all of these technologies are all about simplifying IT, allowing IT to be more proactive and be working with the business more. And we have the other side of IT. That's the side that is gradually stepping away from our control. Bring your own device. How many years have we been hearing about companies should be considering strategies around bring your own device? In 3 years' time, you will not be providing devices to your employees. You probably are going to be providing devices to your employees, but they're still going to bring their devices in. And whether you like it or not, they are going to be using their own personal devices to access your work information. How can you control that? That is shadow IT. We're seeing shadow IT creeping in from all kind of walks of life, all kind of organizations. And it's IT's responsibility not to block the services that the users want to be used. If you have a look at Dropbox, the amount of organizations I speak to and go, do you have a problem with Dropbox? Those that go yes, I know they're speaking to me honestly. Those that go no, not really, or we blocked it on the firewall, they're not using that anymore. Have you though? Are they really not using those services? If you block Dropbox on the firewall, they're using Box.net. Are they using another service? How about when they're home? How about when they're not inside your network? Are they using those services? How about when they're on their mobile phone? The only way to combat shadow IT is by working with the users to be able to provide the services they are asking for and educating them to be able to use them. And the most worrying thing from my perspective is the fact that cyber attacks are growing. I've got some statistics and some different types of cyber attack that are growing that you really won't be anticipating. And for me, whilst the network has moved on, whilst storage has moved on, once our applications have moved on, the fundamental network that you are delivering these workloads on hasn't changed. Whether we like it or not, we're entering the hybrid cloud era. What does that mean? Are you likely to be moving VMs from production up to the cloud? Possibly, but it is software defined. How are we securing our workloads as they are moving between data centers or moving between hosts? How are we providing networking resources that are secure within the virtual environment? Are we still doing that in the way that we were doing it 5 years ago, whilst the rest of the infrastructure has moved on? So yesterday's network service was all around physical devices. Top of rack switches, core switches, we had physical load balancers, physical firewalls, routing of physical appliances. Now, when you were physical, you had 100 plus servers in your data center. That made sense. Everything needed to go back to a central point that was physical. However, we're 85% virtualized now in most cases. Your workloads are no longer on the physical network, your hosts are, and they are talking east to west between different hosts. However, you are still using that physical layer to control your network. Your access, your routing, your load balancing is leaving the virtual environment and is then being dealt with at the physical layer. Is that the right thing for us to be doing in this day and age? We're also looking at manual network configuration changes. How long does it take you to roll out a new application in this day and age? And how long does it then take you to configure load balances, firewall policies, network ports even, inside that virtual environment and physical environment? Personally, I feel gone is the day when we can have a networking team, a virtualization team, and a storage team. It's not just the technology that is conversion, it is the workloads, it is the responsibility we are expecting to do. And I don't think we can really have those segmented areas. Clearly we can still have specialists in those areas, but the virtualization guy needs to know about the networking, the storage guy needs to know about virtualization. It's all coming together. Where we are today inside our virtual infrastructure, as I've largely talked about there, we've abstracted the hardware from the workloads themselves. It no longer matters, unfortunately, for the Dell people in the room, if it's a Dell server underneath it, a HP server or a Lenovo server. Yes, there may be other differentiators, but realistically, our workload can run on any of those servers. It doesn't matter any longer. The storage may have some functionality difference. It will have a performance difference. We clearly need to choose the right storage, but to our workloads, it doesn't matter. It's been abstracted. Automation is king. Where we get the weakest areas inside our systems is where there is human intervention. Where we are doing tasks one at a time. We can easily forget tasks. We can easily misconfigure elements. That's where weakness will be creeping into our systems. So we're seeing the rise of automation. We're using templates inside our virtual environments to be ensuring that they're always at a certain patch level. They've always got a base level of security configuration. But again, we are seeing these greater demands on security. So what is the biggest risk to IT? I ran some DR and business continuity days over the last couple of days, where we had organisations that wanted to come in to discuss what they were doing for DR, what they were protecting against, and learn about some of the technologies that VMware and Microsoft were offering in the space. And as usual, when you talk to anyone about DR and business continuity, the risks to their business, we're protecting against two things: fire and a plane flying into the building. You don't see that many planes flying into the building. We've got to be careful with it these days. But realistically, those are the top two things on everyone's agenda when they're thinking about DR. And unfortunately, most IT providers or most IT managers tend, but not all organisations, the majority of them, to get lumbered with everything when it comes to business continuity. It's kind of like when I used to be in IT, when I used to manage an IT team, it had a plug on it, it was IT's responsibility. DR is a risk to the business, and as much as you hope the business are putting together business continuity plans, generally the lap does fall in IT's hands to be dealing with that. So I did a little bit of research, and I found across this quite useful report by Allianz Insurance. Unsurprisingly, they're trying to sell you some insurance to mitigate the risk on some of these. But obviously, as IT managers, as IT professionals, it's all about mitigating risk. From our perspective, we want to make sure the backups are running. We want to make sure our environment is secure. That is what is important to us as IT professionals. Obviously, some of the other things, the flashing lights, the technology is why we do it. That's what we like doing. But our main responsibility, especially speaking to someone like John Armstrong, is make sure you have the slippiest shoulders in the organisation. That's my role. I make sure that I protect my butt, everything that I do. Anything that you are doing inside IT, we're documenting. We're making sure that if something does happen, we can prove that we did our job and we have thought about every kind of activity that could happen, what are the failure scenarios, make sure there's no single point of failure. Now, looking at this report, this was done in 2016. The elements that I spoke about, natural disaster, things like floods, things like fire and explosion, and maybe theft, are not the top elements in this report. Cyber attacks is now number 3. Now, number 1 and 2 there are market developments and business interruptions. So hopefully, largely, those two are talking about business drivers that IT really can't get that involved with. Number 3, with 28%, is all about cyber incidents of growing inside our environments, and that is going to be the most likely cause of interruption to your business. Microsoft says that attacks are becoming more and more focused on who they are being aimed at. They're becoming more sophisticated, and they're using many more ways than what we're used to. We're probably very used to, when we think about viruses and cyber attacks, we think of things like worms. We're all used to things like the Conflicker virus that made quite a lot of news back in the day, that someone emailed it to you and then it went all around the network. It probably was caused a bit of nuisance. CPU maybe rose on your machine as it was sending spam out to somebody or something like that. Did it affect your business? Maybe a little bit, but your data was still available. We didn't see these massive attacks that were really threatening our business. And we were able to tackle them quite easily with things like antivirus and making sure our signatures were up to date. However, that is all starting to get a bit old-fashioned now, and they're starting to become a lot more intelligent. Microsoft says that it takes businesses, on average, 200 days to realize that your system has been penetrated, that you have a hacker within your system. It will then take you a further 80 days to make sure that you have fixed the issue and secured it. That's quite a scary statistic. And we need to make sure, as part of our business continuity and DR plan, what would we do in the event of a cyber attack? If a ransomware is going around your network, how are you going to handle that? And it is a real case that may happen in these days. And unfortunately, it might mean disconnecting the internet. It might be turning every piece of IT off in the building until you can capture what is causing that. The last thing you want to do is every single PC in your organisation to be caught with a ransomware worm. How much it costs a business? I don't believe any of these figures. I've seen various different figures to £200 per machine, £12 million per incident. I think it really depends on your business, how much you rely on IT, and how much your reputation matters. I think in this day and age as well, social media has completely changed the world in terms of news getting out there. A small business getting attacked by a virus 5-6 years ago may have made the news, but is unlikely. Today, if it's affected your customers, if your customer hasn't received a product, is unable to get hold of you, it could be on Twitter within minutes. And on average, users expect a reply within 5 minutes on a social media platform. So if you have a problem that is bringing the environment down for a prolonged period of time, it can directly affect your reputation. I think one of the things that people don't realise, when you speak to people about some of these exploits, we've all seen people like Sony have got hacked, and it's quite big in the news. But you think, hold on a minute, I'm a 200-user organisation, I'm a 20-user organisation. Does it really matter to me who's going to hack my computers? There was actually a case in America of a laundry firm being hacked by their nearest competitor. And all they did was sat in their CRM system. They sat there and watched. Every single quote that went out to every single one of their customers, they called them up, and they beat their quote. It was enough to nearly put them out of business before they were able to find it. It doesn't take a lot. And there's some of the things that I'm going to show later on in the presentations that actually make you realise how easy it is for your competitor to be able to do some of these things that will affect your business. I suppose don't upset your competitors might be a thing to learn there. But it's no longer we're protecting about bits and bytes when it comes to cyber attacks. The biggest weakness inside our organisations are the employees. Now, I've always said, if we didn't have the employees, IT's job would be that much easier, but unfortunately we also wouldn't have a job. So we're fundamentally having to change the way that we're protecting against these cyber attacks. It isn't just about supplying the right signatures, the right antivirus solution. Social engineering is now the biggest risk when it comes to your environment. This is ways that we can engage with a person to gain information to get into your system. We probably know about phishing attacks. We've all seen people like Barclays Bank send us an email saying we just need to log in to check because we've had a big transaction. It wasn't Barclays Bank, it was someone trying to nick our credit card information. But there are other forms of attacks. One of those is pretexting, building up a repertoire with an employee. There was a lady that was working for a FTSE company in London, and she speaks quite publicly about her role as a business trainer. That's what she does, that is her pretext. She goes in and educates companies on, I don't know, ITIL or any of the other business type training that you do inside your organisations. But she was doing this down in Docklands, and whilst she was there, she was using the opportunity to use the smoking facilities. So obviously when you're down there in the big towers in London, they've all got quite large security requirements. You've got scanning on every building and everything like that. But surprisingly, the smoking shed is just out in the middle of the yard and anybody can go and stand in the smoking shed. So whilst she wasn't there, she was in the smoking shed talking with everybody else that worked in the banking environments, in the environment down there in London. And she was using it as an opportunity to gain information about all of the organisations around her. She was building a repertoire. She was down there for 2 weeks and more. So she would build up relationships with people while she was down there. She would go with drinks with them after work. And all she was trying to do is find enough information for her to be able to sell that information to other people to be able to gain entry to their systems. There are attacks from in. There are employees giving out credentials. There are people coming into our organisation. It's far easier than trying to deploy a worm inside your organisation to be able to get into it. The baiting one is quite interesting. I kind of felt a little bit awkward about saying this because I put USB keys on all of your desks. Feel free to scan them before you use them. They've got some very useful information on them, I promise. But people like me, will stand at the front and they will say that those USB sticks are very interesting. What one company did is they littered USB sticks all around the car park of a company that they were trying to get into it. How many of those people took those USB sticks from the car park and plugged them straight into their computer? That gave the hackers immediate access to the PCs those USB devices have been plugged into. It's scary thinking. The amount of people when I'm at conferences that I see go around collecting USB sticks, they are the gold that you try and find at conferences. Luckily Dell has supplied us with USB chargers, which I think wins it, and hopefully that's going to be less of a risk to your business. We're also seeing a rise in zero-day exploits. A zero-day exploit was detected on average, I think it was once every week. Zero-day exploits are those exploits within the software you use every day that hasn't yet been detected by the manufacturer. And the people out there will look to get their most out of that exploit whilst they can before the manufacturer has been able to detect it and patch it. Amongst the top 10 for zero-day exploits were Flash, Windows, Internet Explorer, and Office. I can guess all of you are probably using near enough every single one of those technologies on every single one of your machines. But ask yourself the question, what is your patch policy on your desktop machines? How are you keeping up to date with patches on your desktop machines? The majority of companies, you may have SCCM, you might have WSUS if that works for anybody. You may have a more advanced technology out there like Mirage from VMware or Landesk or one of these other technologies. But it is becoming increasingly important that we spend the time to make sure we're patching those systems. It's actually recommended by the government that you have an application whitelist now inside your environment, and there's Microsoft technology that will be able to help with that. More so than the group policy that I used to configure when I was part of the IT team. I used to be hated because I used to block every single application other than the ones that we would allow until people realised that you could rename anything Word.exe and it would boot up. Things have now changed. We can now deal with reputation services to do whitelists on applications. And I was really surprised that on the black web, and to be honest with you, it wasn't even on the black web, on the internet, you can find people openly talking about the zero-day exploit they have found, and it gives you the amount of money they wish to have it if you wish to buy that zero-day exploit. £95,000 was one of the figures that I was able to find if you were able to, and the exploit was a zero-day exploitation for local privilege local privilege escalation. So yes, you've got to get into the system as a starting point, but then it doesn't matter which user you get onto, you're then administrator. That is quite a security concern to a lot of people. Last time I looked, they hadn't managed to get the 95,000 and they reduced it to 85,000. But if you want to get into a big enough organisation and get hold of that data, that's probably a drop in the ocean as to what you could get out of them. Launch a ransomware attack or something on that organisation, they're going to end up paying that. It doesn't really matter anymore. Ransomware grew by 35% in 2015. I did the event yesterday with Veeam, and what really surprised me is they dealt with 75 cases this quarter on assisting people to recover their server workloads after a ransomware attack was placed directly upon it. Now that's only the people that rang Veeam up and asked for assistance. Other people maybe paid the ransomware or managed to fix the problem themselves. That's quite a scary thought. You might have seen it on personal laptops, but I think more targeted attacks on businesses, they're more likely to be able to do it. And the bit that really, really scared me was the ransomware as a service. There are websites you can go to pay for the complete ransomware attack as a service. You simply pay your money, you set what your fee is going to be, you say the business that you're going to try to be getting penetrated to, and they deal with it as a service for you. How easy is that? It's not just IT that is benefiting from the cloud and as a service, it's these people. And the way that they do it is a Bitcoin transaction. So if your machine gets corrupted, you are given a fee in Bitcoins that you must pay to be able to get your machine back, and you have 3 days to do it. If within 3 days you don't do it, it goes up by a Bitcoin every single day or every single hour. There's different ways of customizing it. It's a service, so it's easy for all of us to make use of, or not totally. So I think what we need to do, as IT managers, as IT professionals, we need to understand what we can do to make sure we're not next. There was over 500 million personal records lost during 2015. And I looked through a number of different reports, but this one did stand out to me just because of the audience we've got here today. Insurance providers, whether that is brokers or carriers, were amongst the top that had the most credentials lost per attack. It's the nature of the business, it's the nature of the type of data being carried. There was also examples, I've got some on the other slide. I think Morrison's was exploited and they had all of their payroll data. So you might think, I don't really carry personal details, it's not going to affect me. But what would happen if all your employees' data was stolen? You could cause a problem for all of your employees. They could have issues where they have to go and change their bank account details or anything like that. That could cause you to lose some employees. And also if the press gets out there, that could also affect the reputation of your business. 4,000 data breaches across local councils in 3 years, and from law firms, 170 law firms were investigated by the ICO for data breaches in 2014. I couldn't find the statistics for 2015. It is a real risk to business at the moment. And there's some of the names in the UK that, in the press, these were amongst the top 11. There was one that wasn't on here, and that's because they folded after the attack. It was a travel company. The fines were so big. And there's some things we're going to talk about later, certainly in the VMware session, that there is EU legislation coming in, what we think about the EU, I'm sure Josh will be able to talk about that, that you are going to end up getting penalised if you do have a data breach. Companies are now responsible for making sure that data is secure inside your environment. So I've been looking at a multitude of different resources. How can we protect against it? And this was my kind of top 7 that I took away. The first one was identity management and authentication. We need to make sure that that area is as secure as possible. If we look at social engineering, people are gaining access by simply asking for credentials. Hi, I'm your IT support company, I'm going to help you with that problem. Can you just give me your username and password and then I'll be able to sort that issue out for you? It wasn't the IT company. We've had some customers recently that have had similar things with banking codes being given out and things like that as well. So we need to make sure that identity management and authentication are secure. Now, whilst cloud adoption is growing, we need to make sure that we're combining the on-premise authentication with the cloud authentication. We need a single plane. VMware Identity Manager might be a good platform for doing that. Microsoft have other tools. We need to isolate workloads. In this day and age, the way that users are able to get in, there is a way of being able to piggyback off of authentication where users are logging into their machine, not getting their credentials, but you're piggybacking on the authentication token that they've got to then be able to get into other systems. We need to isolate workloads. We can't rely on just protecting the outside of our network. Joe Bagley spoke to it, so CTO of VMware, spoke to it about our networks being like an egg. They're kind of hard on the outside and gooey in the middle. We've got that firewall that's very good on the edge, but once you're in the network, you have free roam to do whatever it is that you want to be able to do inside that network. We need to make sure we're protecting it. And I think for me, the area that really does stand out is the desktops. That is where your users are going to be putting your data at the most risk. Clearly, we've got the servers as well, and if they do get penetrated, we need to do that. But if we can protect user-to-user communication, that is going to mitigate the most risk in my mind. Patch and update manager I've already gone into. Beating shadow IT I started with at the beginning, offering the services that the users want, but ultimately, number 5, making sure they know they're there. It's all very well and good you adopting OneDrive to replace Dropbox, but if you've not shown your users how to use it, how to make the most of it, they're going to continue using Dropbox. You've not mitigated the risk. We also need to enable and educate employees on cybersecurity. And as dumb as it seems, we've probably told our employees don't click on anything in emails that you don't know what it is, but there may be other things. How many of our employees are aware of things like social engineering? How many of our employees would happily have a conversation while they're having a cigarette outside the building about information they really shouldn't be talking about? We do need to go through a process of educating those employees. We can do that via e-learning or a number of different ways, but it is an important aspect. Automate, test, and repeat. Let's remove the human factor from these configurations. By removing the human factor, you remove the risk to the business where there are going to be elements sneaking into your builds where, I forgot to change the root admin password or anything like that with our workforce. And then finally, don't be blind. Acknowledge the problem and learn and involve. The amount of organisations I spoke to, and after you speak to them about security, go, nah, they're fine. We've got the firewall, we've got antivirus. There isn't going to be anything else. I'm not saying you need to go out there and purchase anything. You need to be aware of it. You need to have a plan how you would deal with it. And you need to know what is going on in the industry so you can secure the IT around your business. One of the really useful documents I found, which I think might be on the USB sticks, but I can send it to you afterwards, is that IAD, it's an American government-linked organisation, launched their top 10 ways to be able to do it. And some of the things that we're talking about today were taken off here. So limiting workstation to workstation communications was their number 3. And there were also elements around segregating network functions, also using antivirus reputation services. If your antivirus provider simply uses signature files, it is not acceptable in this day and age. The viruses are being customized to your exact requirement to get into your organization. Someone hasn't written the signature file yet for the organizations in this room. We need to be able to look and see what is going on inside these processes and the effect that it could have on the underlying systems. So that's it from me today. Hopefully it's just set the scene for some of my concerns, I think, that are happening in the IT industry at the moment. And also the exciting time ahead. We're looking at moving on from virtualization now into cloud, into software-defined everything, into software as a service everything, including ransomware. And from an IT perspective, it's a challenge now for us to be ingrained more inside the business, to be working closer with the business and delivering IT solutions that are going to be able to mitigate the risk and deliver the performance that are required. Now I'm going to hand over to Dominic from Dell, who is going to run us through Dell networking and how they're planning in some of this.